We don't have the public land. Most of our land is private, meaning it can be very expensive to hunt in the UK. Not always. You will be shooting off sticks or a tripod because the undergrowth is so high and the species tend to be quite small. So you need to have that height on your side.
What is up, everybody? Mark on the mic, joined by good friend, Mr. Rob Gearing from Spartan Precision. Now, if you're not familiar with Spartan Precision, they specialize in ultralight, versatile, customizable, rapidly deployed rifle support systems. We're talking bipods, we're talking shooting sticks, things of that nature. And I've been using them for the last couple years. Actually, just used one of their bipods, the Hunt Tac Pro, Rob, on a spring bear hunt, and was actually able to get into a spot where I could get prone and shot an absolute tanker of a western mountain bear. So, Rob, it worked again. Now, we're not talking, well, we might talk a little bit about spring bears this year because I can't help myself. But we're going to talk, I'm sure we'll cover a lot of ground here, but the main topic of conversation is hunting the UK, which is where you are at. And Rob, I was familiar with your products, but I'd never really considered or thought much about hunting the UK until I listened to you on a different podcast talking about hunting red stag in the Scottish Highlands, and I was super intrigued by it. I looked it up on the old interweb, and I got to see what this place looks like. The landscape was breathtaking. It reminded me somewhat of like the Alpine of Kodiak or the North Cascades of Washington in some regards. The animals looked super cool. The hunt and the place just sounded amazing. And I mean, it was serendipitous. I bump into you at a show. We start chatting a little bit. I'm like, I got to pick this guy's brain about hunting the UK. And I think I'll actually be hunting the UK here pretty soon this year.
You're coming. Yeah, you're coming. So, I mean, Scotland's, there's a lot of history there, Mark, and it's an amazing environment. There's a lot of history. There's the flora and fauna is very similar, as you say, to what you've been exposed to. There's a lot of moisture. There's very few trees. There's very little protection for the deer. They don't get huge in Scotland. You know, those red stags up in Scotland are basically the same stags we've got down in the West Country of the UK, and they're half the size. I'm generalising, which is always dangerous. But when you've got no cover, a load of water, and you're living off pretty food, the inevitable happens. It's a struggle to survive.
Interesting.
And there's a good population of them, so there's a lot of competition. But we've got 6 species of deer in the UK, Mark. 3 of them are true natives. You could argue about one being the fallow, because the fallow deer was either brought over by the Romans or the Normans. Nobody knows for sure, but it's considered true native now. We've got the red deer, the fallow, and the roebuck, a roe deer. They're the true natives. We've also got sika, muntjac, and Chinese water deer, which are all introduced. And there is a tiny herd, I believe, of reindeer up in Scotland somewhere floating around, but they're so small they're not really considered. And they were introduced in the Cairngorms. But that's our species. No big predators. We don't have bears. We don't have wolves. We did have bears. We did have wolves. We've got a few wild boar floating around, but no big cats. We have a Highland cat, a Scottish cat, wild cat, which is a small cat, and they're really dangerously, I mean, they're about, but not in any great number.
Are they a native cat then?
Yeah, true native cat. I've seen 2 in my lifetime. I've been incredibly lucky to see them. And they do breed with domestics as well, so there's a bit of an argument. Are any of them still really pure or not? I'm not an expert, I don't know. But they're a very cool little cat for sure.
How big are they? Are they about the size of a bobcat or something like that? Bigger, smaller?
No, smaller than a bobcat. Yeah, more like a big domestic cat, I would say. So maybe 15 pounds, I reckon. 15, 20 pounds would be a big one. Again, I'm guesstimating. I don't actually know, but I've seen them and they're not huge. They're not going to be any threat to deer species, that's for sure.
Gotcha. Well, that's a lot more critters that a person can consider chasing or go chase or hunt over there than I was aware of. That kind of do they live in the same regions? Like you might encounter multiple of these on a single hunt, or would a person be like, no, I want to go chase this, so I need to go over here?
So, very good question, Mark. If you came to London, if you flew into London, for example, and you wanted to hunt with me down south, which is different, completely different flavoured hunting in Scotland, I could get you in the woods hunting roebuck, fallow, and muntjac within an hour of landing, right? So you've got 3 species here that you have a good chance of hunting, and successfully so. The deer population is higher now than it was since medieval times. We've got huge numbers of fallow deer, a very good roe population. The muntjac are just spiraling out of control. So there's a lot of deer. And the reason, probably one of the reasons, is we don't have any apex predators. Also, we don't have a lot of people with firearms licenses in the UK. And we can talk about this, and I've been told off in the past, but hunting in the UK, and I'm going to say exactly the same thing I said before, and I get told off again probably, you are blessed over there because you've got your public land, right? So within reason, anybody can go and get a rifle, they can go out and hunt. Now, there's things I really like about that. There's also things I don't necessarily like, because I do believe some substance of training is needed, and sometimes people can go out and be a bit naive. And look, I don't pretend to be an expert on anything. I get lots of different flavors and I know a little bit about a lot of things. But I think when you're handling firearms, particularly hunting, you really need some basic knowledge. And a lot of European countries, you have to have a license or do that basic knowledge before you get granted permission to go and hunt, which I do think is a good thing. But we don't have the public land, meaning most of our land is private, meaning it can be very expensive to hunt in the UK. Not always. There are ways that people can, if you've got friends and things like that, if you wanted to come over, Mark, it's easy. And for me, it's a deer management role as opposed to a deer hunting role. If I took you out and we saw 5 fallow deer, I'd probably want 5 fallow deer dead, right? Because we're trying to control those numbers and get on top of them because of the forestry, the crops, and the damage they do. Another thing that we have about hunting in the UK that you don't have over there, a few bonuses, there's not many of them, Mark, but I'll share them with you, is we can sell the meat direct back into the food chain. So if I'm working for an estate, for example, one of these private estates, if we shoot those deer, all we'll do is remove the green. We'll take the guts out, we'll leave the jackets on, take the head off, take the legs off, hang them in the larder, and the game dealer will come and pick those up and pay for them. And if we have a game license, we can do that direct with the pubs and restaurants or supermarkets as well, or butchers. I quite like that. I think you did used to do that in the States, but I mean, for many good reasons, it probably was stopped because people can get a little bit greedy. The thing about the UK is, as I say, there's probably 60,000 firearms license holders in the UK. You think about that with a population of 70 million people. So there's very few of us out actually doing this. What that does do is it gives many of the deer hunters, called deer stalkers over here, a lot of experience behind the rifle, and they can get very good at what they do because they spend so much time managing deer. I've got deer stalking buddies over here that will shoot 200 deer a year. It's a big number. And I'm not doing anything like that anymore. I hardly pull the trigger, honestly, when I'm back in the UK, because I'm so rarely back in the UK. But sure, I just talk you through the species and what's good about them, or what I find exciting. For me, the top of the tree is roe deer. I grew up hunting roe deer. This is a deer that, for your listeners, is the size of a Labrador dog, pretty small. In the summer, they're a glorious chestnut red, beautiful looking deer, and they grow a small, short antler probably I'd say between 6 and 12 inches. But they are stunning, and they're so very different depending on where you hunt them. You know, if you're hunting them in Hampshire, they'll be a particular shape. If you're hunting them in Scotland, they'll be maybe a more heart shape, and somewhere else they'll be more straight. So they're a really fascinating species, and they're quite a solitary animal. You can call them in during the rut because the female makes a little squeak, and you can call them in. Normally, you get the young bucks come in unless you're really good at it, because the old bucks they get old for good reason. They know what they're doing. But it's a fantastic species to hunt. And the meat's really good on this deer. Well, the meat's good on all of the deer, but I really do like the roebuck.
That's awesome. Deer. That's awesome. Yeah, I always appreciate another person who can appreciate, you know, the smaller big game critters that we can chase. You know, I grew up hunting Columbia black-tailed deer in Western Washington, which, you know, they're in some ways some commonalities with what you're saying there, like smaller stature deer, compact, you know, oftentimes super dark antlers, you know, I guess compared to like a mule deer or something like that. A lot of people would find them like not super impressive, but oh my gosh, I appreciate everything about those deer, or Sitka blacktails, or Coues deer, which are even, you know, so much smaller and an incredibly petite deer. But man, I have an affinity for, I guess, the smaller type deer species. I guarantee I would like those guys that you're talking about. I want to circle back to when you're talking about, you know, being able to hunt for market. You know, here in the States, we had a lot of, you know, I guess, you know, populations decline, get into trouble due to market hunting. So, you know, our North American model doesn't allow for that. But then, in contrast, I do wonder, we're in some regions, not all regions, you know, we have white-tailed deer populations that have absolutely exploded. They've exceeded the carrying capacity. There's actually, you know, difficulty in getting folks to harvest enough does to, you know, to help better, I guess, you know, improve the landscape and the population levels. And I wonder, I'm like, could select market hunting be the incentive to get those populations back in check? And that concept is so foreign to us over here now. But it's like, is there an actual need for it? I've been asking that question for a little bit, and I don't know, like, is that, it works for you guys. You could say, look, well, that's a slippery slope. I don't know, but it's an interesting thing to think about.
So here's my take on that. Number one is, think of the quality of the meat on these animals. It's way, way better than anything you're going to buy in the supermarket or the butcher. There's nothing, you know, these guys are out there eating their stuff. I will always eat game or venison above anything else. And probably when I was younger, I said not, but now I just think, God, that thing that's as organic as you're going to get. I mean, obviously it can still eat spray crops and blah, 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 but it's certainly better than anything you're going to be able to buy, even if it says it's classed as organic. So number one, I think there's huge value in this meat if it's marketed in the right direction. Number two, I've seen your deer populations grow. I've been coming to America. I'm 60 now. I've been coming to America for the last 40 odd years, and places where you wouldn't have seen deer when I started coming to America, they're everywhere. So I think you're absolutely onto something, Mark. If you could manage it and process it in a certain way, or do it as an exploratory thing. It's like we manage our badgers over here, but we do it under license very strictly. And there's probably 50 people that are badger controllers, and they're just carrying out that experiment. The byproduct of harvesting these things is too valuable not to do it. The forest I live on, Ashdown Forest, had a no-kill policy on deer for years. And what that meant was the number of road traffic accidents that we'd have with the deer. And in the end, it just got stupid. You know, hundreds of accidents every year with these deer. So deer getting maimed, people getting injured, and no byproduct from it. It's just there was no good outcome. Now they manage the deer species, and they're harvesting that deer, and they're getting that venison, they're getting some money, pop back on the forest. Everybody's a winner.
Yeah, and it might not make sense, at least I'm talking in terms of over here, like maybe you don't do it for elk or mule deer, but maybe it does make sense for whitetails, and in certain areas, it's going to benefit the landscape, the flora, the fauna. It's going to benefit the deer populations themselves. It's going to reduce vehicle incidents, like you mentioned. As long as it's a net positive, which is what we're trying to do, however you manage game, I get to see it being a big plus. And then you have the food component as well. Yeah.
So me personally, I hunt for meat first, antlers second, right? Because I've grown up doing it. I mean, there's exceptions to that. I still get super excited hunting roebuck. I was in Spain, in the Pyrenees, a month or so ago, hunting with a Spanish friend. And I had one opportunity, a really stunning buck, and I got so freaking excited, I went straight over the top of it. And I go, oh, well, that happens. Even somebody like me that does it a lot, I'm still going to make those mistakes. And Oscar Colomi, out of Spain, lovely guy, took me down there. They've had huge rains down in Spain, so the grasses were really high. So it was really challenging to find any roe. And we finally found this one. I thought, I got that buzzy feeling. And thank goodness I still get that fuzzy feeling. I love it. So I took that miss and I thought, no, that I can live with that. Nothing's injured, nothing's hurt. And that was the one opportunity I had with Oscar. It means I have to go back next year and try again. Yeah.
Oh man, I tell you what, it's those things. I don't know. You always remember the ones that you got, and that's your goal, and you want everything to go perfectly when you get out there. But man, sometimes the ones that keep you coming back are the misses as well. And you're just like, okay, that's on now. We got to do this again. I'll be back out here. And it's like the success and the failures, I feel like, drive you equally to go be out in the woods again.
Well, I'll get back into the UK right after this. I promise, Mark, but I have to tell you this story. So a couple of weeks ago, I was in Transylvania, Romania, Count Dracula territory in the Carpathian mountain range. And I was with a friend there who invited me out to do some roe stalking. I have never seen as many roe deer anywhere. And I've been to lots of places. They were literally beautiful landscape. If anybody wants to go to Transylvania, I encourage you to do it. Absolutely stunning landscape. Big bear population, big wolf population, and a lot of roebuck. And he said, look, they were all massive roe. I mean, roe are tiny, but they were beautiful heads. And I probably had 30 opportunities and I said, I just don't want to shoot that. I think he's got a few years left. And my friend Paul never judged me for it. He didn't say, he told me at the end, and I thought, oh, maybe I should have. Anyway, I was being really picky. I shot 2 roebuck, 2 that had a lot of maturity on them, really nice, heavy in the antler, and blah, blah, blah. And I left all the rest because I said, if you give them a couple of years, Paul, they're going to be fantastic. Well, later, he turned around and said to me, he said, that population of deer you've seen there, he said, it's massive now. We've got 3 packs of wolves in this area, within a few hundred kilometers. They'll come through this place and they'll clean them out, right? And you'll see 10% of the deer population that survive. And many of those big bucks I was seeing, he said, they don't get to maturity. That's why you don't see many mature ones. So had I known that, I'd have probably shot some more because they get nailed anyway. And what Paul does is he gives the meat to the local community. There's a lot of people that are pretty poor over there. So we got some too, a guy that was not doing very well. We gave him and it stops the poaching or helps. He said, I know these guys are going to poach, so I'd rather give them a deer and all works out. Anyway, back to the UK.
So, yeah. Well, I do. Well, of course, now I've got another question. So the wolves, they'll kind of come in, set up shop, clean it out, and then move on to a different region, and then eventually filter back in. Is that kind of like how they're working there?
Absolutely. Every year they'll get one of these parcels or a set of wolves come through and clean the place out. He's got red deer. The red deer cope with the wolves better, but the roe are very vulnerable during the winter. They'll also eat the young bears. So they'll pick on the bears at under a couple of 100 kilos. They kill the bears. So the wolves are really cleaning up pretty effectively. And everything's growing. You know, the wolf population's going up, the bear population's going up. As I said before the podcast, I had their mountain rescue guy was eaten this year, just walking his dogs. He got between a mum and a cub, and that was the end of him. And people are getting killed now. And the bear population, I was speaking to people my age, and I said, you'd never have seen a bear when we were kids. You might have seen a footprint somewhere and be, oh, that's awesome, right? Now, I mean, I spent a week there. I saw a lot of bears, and some of these bears are huge. I mean, 500-kilo bear he had. I saw the footprints of this thing. It was like looking at an elephant's footprints. And 500 kilos for America, that's over 1,000 pounds. That's a big beastie.
Yeah. Unbelievable. And can you hunt those as well then, or not?
Yeah, they have a hunt protocol in Romania, and I think they're allowed to harvest about 500 bears a year. It's probably not enough, but the party that manage it, the way they score the bears, you're only allowed to harvest the small ones, right? So if it's too big, you know, too tall or too wide or blah, 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 you can't have. I don't understand the logic to that. I have but, you know, it's where somebody probably is pressing the wrong buttons to get the wrong answers. But we'll find out. I can certainly find out more, but it's a fascinating country. And as I say, the Carpathian Mountains is a beautiful part of the world.
Wow, that's super cool. May have to podcast about that someday.
Yeah, we can do that.
Sure. Like you said, bringing it back to the UK, and you touched on some of these things, but the hunting model there is dramatically different than what we're used to here in the States. So if you can, you know, walk me through kind of exactly what that looks like from, you know, estates, gamekeepers, stalkers. You know, you talked on the fact that, you know, the meat, you know, goes to market, which is, you know, interesting and different from here in the States. But if a person's like, oh, I'm intrigued by this, like, what does that look like for them when they get there?
Yeah, okay. Well, first off, there's a very ready marketplace. If Americans want to come to Europe to hunt, not just the UK, but let's just stick to the UK for the moment, it's very easy, right? There's some very good deer stalkers in the south, in the mid, up in Scotland. Lots of people. And if you get any interested parties, you know, after this podcast, I'm not an expert on it, but I know some good people. I can certainly link them in with the right people. I think you could literally get off your flight at Heathrow or Gatwick, and you could be. England's small, eh? You know, it's not very difficult to get to a place fast, but there's some magical parts of the country that offer really wonderful deer stalking. It just depends what you're looking for. So we've got very wooded areas. We've got open plains, and then we've got Scotland, and you've got like the Lake District, which is more moorland. So there's lots of different environments. You tend to find that the deer stalkers will specialize on some of the species of deer because they're being regions that obviously have those deer. I can't think of one place, although there probably is, where you could get all 6 species. And particularly the Chinese water deer and the muntjac are quite pocketed. So they spread, but they don't spread very fast. You'll get places where you get red deer, sika deer, and roe deer, or you'll get places like I could take you where we've got muntjac, roe, and fallow. But I can't think of anywhere where you get them all. If you wanted to do all 6 species, you'd probably have to move about the country a wee bit, which isn't too challenging. So these estates that you asked about, they're private estates, they're privately owned parcels of land. Many of them have been owned by the same sort of families since the Norman conquest. You know, it's incredible. So they go back and back and back. And those estates will be anything from 1,000 acres to 40,000, 50,000 acres, even more maybe. But they could be really small ones, they could be big ones. Some of our ground, so I had a friend from Serbia that I took roe stalking with a very good friend last week, and we were hunting in Hampshire and Dorset, so southwest UK. One of the estates we were on is 300 acres, Mark. It's tiny, but it holds monster bucks because it's like a buck magnet. You know, they just keep coming in because there's a lot of food, there's a lot of cover there. And we had an epic time. And I saw Stefan's face, my friend from Serbia, when he said, I was 300 acres. And it was like, oh, this is not going to be very exciting. Well, if you asked him now, after the event, and we should ask him actually, he had a wicked time and he shot some lovely bucks.
Oh,
and then down in Dorset, we had 4,000 acres to play with. And again, some fantastic, but totally different environments. Those two places are 2 hours apart, not even that, but it's like hunting on a different country, in a different country.
I mean, that's really,
so it's very varied.
Yeah, and that's really cool that in a very short amount of time you could be in two completely different landscapes, you know, potentially hunting different critters. And then like what you were talking about there with, you know, 300 acres, like around here in Wisconsin, you know, 300 acres is that's a decent chunk for a lot of folks, and you could hunt some big bucks and you know, like if I had access to a good 300 acre piece here, I would be I'd be living high on the hog and thinking I've got a good chance of getting a real big buck every year. You know.
Yeah, it just depends on your environment, because if you're out west, you probably might have a different view, mightn't you?
Yeah.
It's just, or if you're up in Wyoming where you've got big, scrolly, dry, arid places, you're going to need a bit more ground. But being so fertile, it holds a lot of deer, and yeah, it's a pretty exciting place to hunt. So you could do Scotland, you could do the Lake District, you could do Sussex, Hampshire. There's lots and lots of different places, and the nice thing is, it's almost a family-friendly event. If you wanted to bring your family out, because you could do a bit in London. You're never far from a good hotel if you wanted to do it. You're never far from a budget hotel if you wanted to do it. So you can do it high end or low end, and equally there'll be, you know, companies that are more focused on the high end marketplace that will know how to take a few dollars from you, and there'll be people that will do it more on a shoestring for you. I had a conversation with a guy from California yesterday who said, I've seen all your hunts, Rob. I want to go and do a real wilderness hunt. I'm from Montana. Where would you go? And I said, well, if you want to do a wilderness hunt, the UK is not the place, because we don't have the private land, don't have the public land, and it's not big enough to spend 10 days out. And he wanted to hunt ibex or chamois. So I ended up nesting him into New Zealand. And I said, if you want to do a budget hunt, New Zealand is the perfect place, because you've got your chamois. There's guys that will take you out. He had a budget. And I said, anyway, I linked him in. So it's finding the right dietary requirements for your users at the end of the day. And I think the UK has a lot to offer, but it's frustrating for me. And this is the downside of the UK, that as a young man, I couldn't afford to go hunting. I went rock climbing instead, because I didn't have your public lands. It wasn't easy to get firearms. So I spent my life with an air gun, shooting pigeons and rabbits and shooting them in a graveyard, poaching, right, and selling them to the neighbours for 50p a pop, kind of thing. Or it might be 25 pence. I can't remember. Inflation's a difficult thing. But I grew up using that, you know, and that's my love of hunting. It wasn't until I got to my late 20s I was actually able to go and hunt deer. So I evolved pretty slowly on that front, and it was just like a drug for me when I got into it.
Is a path like yours? You know, you were into it as a kid, but you didn't necessarily have the opportunity to go do some of these things that you can do now. Is that common for most folks? If they do get into it, it's like eventually you have the means and you can start doing some of these things over there? Because that's tricky too, because by the time you get to that age, oftentimes maybe you like to golf or you like to do this, or you just don't have an interest because you didn't grow up with it in any way.
Well, I didn't grow up with it. None of my family were hunters. I just loved guns, and I love nature. I love being outdoors. So I glued those together and thought, I want to do some hunting. But it's a very good question. But bear in mind, there's 70 million people on this tiny little post of, you know, Stamford land. It isn't possible for everybody to do it. And I've met a lot of people that have been quite interested. I've taken a lot of people out hunting in the past that weren't hunters and said, well, come and just try it out. But when you've got them, when you've opened that doorway for them, where do they go? It's not easy, Mark. because there's not a natural they can't go, right, I'm going to go to Shields and buy my gear. I've got all that public land. I get my hunting permit. There is not that segue. So it's really challenging. And a lot of people will fail at the doorstop. You know, they'll come to the door and won't get through, or they'll come out once and think, I'd really like to do this, but I can't find a mechanism to get from A to B. And that's a shame. That's sad. But I guess that's a country that's overpopulated with a tiny landmass and no public land. And that's the result you get. Now, what we do have are 3 colleges. So it's a professional qualification. You can be a deer stalker, you could be a gamekeeper, forestry, but these colleges are very good and they tend to produce very good results. And you end up having well-qualified students. And those private estates we were talking about earlier, Mark, will often end up employing these guys to look after their land and manage their deer. Now, if you get friendly with these people, that could be a good segue into deer stalking. If you've grown up on a farm, it could be a good segue into deer stalking. But unless you're very friendly with people like that or know people like that, you don't. If you've grown up in the central London, you are going to find it very challenging to go deer stalking. Of course, you can do it if you've got the dollar. You know, there's always somebody that's going to take you out.
Can you tell me, what is and the difference between a gamekeeper and a professional stalker?
Yeah, a gamekeeper predominantly looks after birds because there is a big bird shooting world in the UK. We're driven by it. So these driven bird days, are part of the UK. They've been there for hundreds of years. And my daughter ended up, I had a very good friend that was a gamekeeper. He got a job with the Duke of Abisted. And he said, bring your daughter up, because my daughter had a working Cocker Spaniel. And we went up to Abisted, and my daughter would have been 12 at the time. And she gets out and she's working the dog. And who's next to her? The Queen. So the Queen's working her labs next to my daughter. That's that kind of world that you think, where on earth would this ever happen anywhere else? So there's a 12-year-old kid spends the day with the Queen doing what the Queen really wants to do. And we're sleeping at my friend's house, and also sleeping at my friend's house is the Queen's dog handler, nice guy. And he said, Rob, what are you going to be doing tomorrow? I said, well, I'm just beating the line, because you have all these beaters pushing the birds through. We don't do what you do. We don't have them in cages. The birds are raised in the woods, right, in little heated units. They're kept in the woods. They're fed in the woods. They know their areas. They fly. Those gamekeepers bring them on. They could either do them from incubators or they buy them like a 6-week poults, but they stay in the woods, right? And those birds will live and die in the woods or get shot in the process. Anyway, the Queen's dog handler said to me, what do you want to do tomorrow? Do you want to take one of the Queen's dogs? And I said, yeah, I'll give that a go. He said, you can have Spitfire. And you can imagine the quality of these dogs, Mark. They are going to be trained impeccably well. So I get Spitfire in the morning. Spitfire comes, I'm not proud of this story, but it's freaking funny. Spitfire comes back to me with a pheasant in its mouth, and I pick the pheasant up, and it's not dead, and it flies, and I let it go. If that dog could talk, it looked at me and went, you are just not fit for purpose, mate. It wouldn't work with me for the rest of it. That was it. That was my Queen dog experience over. Yeah, I failed at the first hurdle. But my daughter had a great day with the Queen, picking up that, it's they love it. And those big days are pretty impressive. I haven't done super big days, but like 200, 300 bird days. I've done that in the past, and they really know how to push these birds and get some height flight behind them. So we talked about firearms users, rifle users, right? Shotguns, a lot of people will be into shotguns, both for clay pigeons and bird shooting. It's not something I tend to do too much. Not that I wouldn't like to, it's just I don't have the time to do everything. So I tend to sort of concentrate behind the rifle or the fly rod these days.
Is number one, that's an incredible story. You know, hearing about, I mean, my goodness, hunting with the queen's dog, your daughter's, working her dog right alongside. I mean, what an incredible experience. Like you said, where else would something like that happen? And then I wanted to ask this about shotguns. Is shotgun ownership more relaxed than, say, a centerfire rifle, or is it still kind of the same sort of process to get one?
No, really good question, Mark. It's much easier. It's still difficult. You'd be shocked how difficult it is. It's still challenging to get a shotgun, but it's nowhere near as hard as getting a centerfire rifle. Yeah.
Okay.
A centerfire rifle is a challenge these days to get it. And I don't necessarily disagree with what I'm about to say here. If you want to go and hunt deer, they like you to do, there's certain courses, deer stalking courses. Now, it's not mandatory, and it isn't mandatory, and it shouldn't be, but the police try and make you say, well, you've got to do this. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I'm sure some cleverer people than me could argue both ways. But you think about it, Mark, we're hunting in small parcels of land, often dog walkers, often people out, but it's thick green. You want to be safe, right? And you really want to know what you're doing. And touch wood, thank God. There's very few accidents in this country.
Yeah. I mean, I think no matter where you are, mastering and being cognizant of the basic fundamentals of firearms is, a good thing, right?
Yeah. I absolutely believe in that. And some of the countries around Europe, like Germany, for example, and Sweden, those tests are pretty major. Denmark's the same. It's not easy to get your hunting license. You really have to want it. Yeah.
Interesting. And that's a tricky thing too, because I mean, as you know, like we learn to hunt like over a lifetime, and part of that learning process, like you always want to be safe, right? But it's trial and error. You make mistakes along the way. You learn from those mistakes. I mean, it truly is a lifelong learning process. And I could see where having a high degree barrier of entry to just get into it would kind of, but it could put some people off to where they never get to experience those things.
I think you're absolutely right. I had a Swedish friend, a very good Swedish friend, come over fly fishing this weekend, and he wrote the Swedish hunting manual. I know we're going off track again a little bit, but all these countries are different. But it's there's 9,000 people that do that hunting license in Sweden on a good year. That's a lot of people doing that hunting license. Sweden's got a lot of hunting culture in there, and everybody, if they don't hunt, knows a hunter. So they're very open about it. It's very engaged. And they do, I believe, have a bit of public land as well. So it's quite a good mix. And they also have areas where they have like hunting clubs. So obviously moose, for example, you shoot a moose, it's a big animal. And so you might have 8 people in that club, and you might get a tag to shoot 1 moose a year. So it's different structure. That does not happen in the UK. And the good thing about the UK is there are no shortage of deer species. The populations are very healthy on all those deer species we discussed. Some of them are a lot more challenging than others. Hunting seeker deer, it's their hard work. I mean, they're very clever, they're very switched on, and you really need to know your game. Hunting a Chinese water deer, my view, I've never hunted one, frankly, because they're so easy. It doesn't really sort of give me a real appetite to do it. Whereas roebuck I love, seeker deer I love. The red deer up in Scotland, which you'll be trying, that's all about the culture, the history and such. Like it's a pretty spectacular thing to do. And it's just a lovely thing to do if we can get the deer ponies out. So they have ponies in Scotland. We should discuss this quickly. Those ponies were originally they're Hispanic ponies. They came over with the Spanish Armada, and the Spanish dropped them off. I only found this out last year. And they little hardy ponies, but the Scots trained them to be deer ponies. So when you shoot your deer, right, they'll come up with a pony and put the deer on the pony and bring it back to the lodge. Now, that's old school hunting lodges. Most people now use Argo cats and quads and things to get them back. But if you get that opportunity, it's really special, because it's like, I'll do it. I'll go hunting in Scotland in a kilt just for the crack, because it's all cold. So they're just different flavors. But at the end of the day, why do we do it, Mark? We do it because it's a little bit different. It's a new flavor, and it's a great. I love doing those things.
Well,
just as outside.
So yeah, and I think that's when I wanted to ask about this, because you're talking about getting your game out on with a traditional pony or an Argo or something of that nature. Oftentimes, when I go hunting, I'd say particularly out west, but I'm going with a backpack. I'm going with a kill kit. I've got my game bags to cut up an animal and hang it up and get it out in pieces. Is that something that you guys aren't doing over there ever, or you're doing that sometimes, or it always comes out just with the hide on, like guts out, hide on, and then it goes to market?
We do everything almost 180 poles apart. Yeah, exactly. We had some Swedish guys come over late last year. They're back for a weekend. We shot 120 deer in 2 days, right? You think of the processing there. So those deer, all of them was just the green comes out, the heads come off, the legs come off, the jackets stay on, they go into the larder. The game dealer has to know, because our larder won't cope with those kind of numbers. So he has to basically be on call to come and pick the deer up as we're shooting them. But it's, big numbers of deer. But no, we don't cut them up. And our species they don't warrant it. We don't have the elk, we don't have the bears, we don't have the moose. The red deer up in Scotland is not a huge animal. You end up dragging them off the hill. Two guys can drag a red deer off the hill pretty quick, because it's mossy, and you invariably coming downhill at the end of the day anyway. So you often just drag them down. Interesting.
I do want to circle back, because we talked about gamekeepers and the birds. If you're hunting, we'll say, Scotland or the UK, you're going to be going with a stalker. And I would say, is the closest parallel, would that be like a hunting guide here in the States then?
Absolutely bang on. A deer stalker, professional deer stalker, would be your hunting guide for deer, right? Now, a gamekeeper tends to look after birds. They're very different tools in this country. Your gamekeeper might not even own a rifle, or if he does, he might own a small bore rifle just to control pests. But a gamekeeper tends to look after birds. A deer stalker manages the deer. And then we have professional hunters that work for the National Trust, work for the Forestry Commission, that will normally come from those colleges, or they're ex-soldiers, that tend to be very familiar with firearms. And they tend to make very good deer stalkers, make very good guides. Yeah. But yeah, that's a good analogy.
Cool. And then, we've talked about the model, here in the States, like we have tags. It could take multiple years, even if you were going to book a hunt with an outfitter, it could take you multiple years to draw a tag, and then you finally book that hunt. With you guys, I mean, if you booked something, like, you're going, right? Like, if you said, I want to go next year, and you could book it, you can go.
Yeah, absolutely. If you phoned me up and said, Rob, I want to come and try this rose stalking, I say, yeah, get yourself on a flight, as long as the season's right, obviously, and we're going to go out, we're going to hunt some roe. And there's no tags. If you said, I want to shoot 30 roe deer, nobody's going to stop you. It might end up being quite expensive, but it's, particularly if they're not, you can pay a lot of money for good roebuck stalking. But it's literally, there is no shortage of these animals, right? We just can't. In my career as deer hunters, deer managers, let's say, I've seen the species of fallow just go out of control. I'm seeing fallow deer now, a bit like you were saying about your whitetail, places I would never have ever seen them, wouldn't have even dreamed of seeing them 10 years ago. So we've lost the race. We have lost the race. And the problem is, I wouldn't want to be a farmer in the south of England growing crops now, because you could have 140 fallow deer in your crop at night, and just they're crapping in there, they're eating it, and it's pretty soul destroying.
Wow. Well, and you mentioned the right season. So what, and maybe it depends, right? We have different seasons for different critters here too, but what do your season structures look like? And I imagine it's up to the estate in a lot of regard, but when are folks hunting? Is it predominantly in the fall like it is here in the States, or is it, how does that look?
Depends on the species, Mark. So if we're talking roebuck, the 1st of April is when you can start shooting roebuck, and that runs, I believe, till November, right? But for the bigger species, yeah, you really want to be doing them in hard antler. So you sort of October time is a good month. So fall for most of the other species. Muntjac, Chinese water deer, anytime you like. And really, muntjac are sort of considered a pest anyway. And the females tend to get pregnant within 3 days of giving birth. So they're pretty prolific. So there is no breeding season for muntjac. They're just popping them out all over the time.
Wow, that is interesting. What can a person expect? It sounds like the terrain varies greatly. What about weather, bugs? Like when do most of these things rut? Like the stags up in Scotland. What's going on there?
Yeah, they're good questions. Let's address those. Let's talk about bugs first. So bugs in Scotland from like May through to September can be torture, right? We have this thing called midges over there. They're tiny, like little no-see-em flies, and they bite. And if there's no wind, right, these things are going to nail you. They'll be in your ears, in your eyes, and they are horrible. We have a few mosquitoes, nothing really to write home about. It's not, if you've got an 8-mile-an-hour wind, the midges won't fly. So if there's a little bit of a wind, and there's mostly a breeze, they're not too bad, but they can be torture. So you do want to come with a midge net for your face and such, like if you come at that time of year. Write that down for Scotland, Mark. You'll thank me. Yeah. The rest of the country, really not too bad. Not any really nasty fly life that I can think of. We do have a big problem with ticks. So Stefan, they really enjoyed him. He had 100 ticks on him. He counted 100 ticks in the 4 days he was hunting with me. I got 3. So you make that up. I don't know why, but he was covered in them.
Interesting. Yuck. Do you guys have any issues with Lyme disease then?
Yeah, we absolutely do. I've got a few friends that have had it and really has nailed them. It's not common, but it's definitely, you do need to be aware of it. I mean, I'll pick up ticks every year. I've taken, I think it's Dr. Cillin, isn't it? I think I've taken it twice in my life where I've been a bit concerned, but not a problem. I've not had a problem myself. And as long as you remove the ticks quite quickly, I understand that they're not, if they're in you for like 24 hours plus, then there's a danger. I've had a few friends that have come up with the target patches and they've gone straight to the doctors and got the medication. But yeah, ticks can be a problem, but it's pocketed. I mean, I live 3 hours from where I was taking my friend rose stalking. I never pick up a tick here. And yet Dorset, if I go to Dorset or Hampshire, I always get ticks. So yeah, you do need to be aware of them.
Is the tick prevalence, is that seasonal? Like, here in Wisconsin, or even when I go out west, turkey hunting or spring bear hunting, like the spring is a very, spring, summer, a very ticky time, seems to fall off, in the fall and definitely in the winter months. Is it similar for you guys, or is it just kind of all the time?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Wet springs is really when they're prevalent. A little bit of warmth, a lot of moisture, and they seem to love that.
Gotcha. Weather during the fall, what's that look like?
You could have anything thrown at you, from storms to beautiful. In the fall, it could be 70, 80 degrees, or it might be like really cold. So you just need to, unfortunately, you need to pack for all eventualities there. Certainly in Scotland, you hope for some good weather, but it can be atrocious, particularly on the West Coast.
Gotcha. What about rut timing for stag and maybe some of these other other critters. When does that occur? And you mentioned
October.
calling too, which I think that sounds really cool.
Yeah. So for the roebuck, the calling's in July, and you squeak them, and that's really exciting. We should plan something like that, Mark. I think, from your perspective, you'd really get to enjoy it. And the other nice thing about roe stalking, as I say, there are small animals that are very easy to manage. You can do it in a summer's evening, and I like that. You can go out for a few hours and end up in a beautiful place, see a lot of wildlife, and call some bucking. It's a very exciting hunt. For the stags, red deer, stags, and sika, obviously it's much later in the year. For the muntjac, you can call them any time of year. They're just quite an inquisitive little animal because they're obviously having babies all the time. So you can often squeak them out with the same call, ironically, that you use for a roe. Both those deer bark, and basically muntjac are called barking deer because they just sound like a dog kicking off in the woods. But the roe will do that as well.
Interesting. You mentioned, I want to talk a little bit about rifles. You mentioned a lot of these critters aren't too big. So I want to talk about, I guess, if a person, and I'm looking at it primarily from the perspective of a person coming from the States over there. If you're booking a hunt on an estate or like, should a person bring their favorite rifle? Is it better and more, I don't know, logistically less complex to borrow a good rifle? And then what about calibers? Like what's the most common thing being used over there?
Right. Okay. Good. Very good questions. So you'll see a lot of 308. You'll see a lot of 6.5 Swede. You'll see a lot of 6.5 Creedmoor. 243 still popular. Few 7 mils or less. Some 270s up in Scotland because it's nice flat shooter. But that's pretty much. I will do everything with a 6.5 Creedmoor in the UK because there's nothing that warrants anything bigger than that. You're not talking about crazy distances. You might do a long shot in Scotland because it's open, but you're down the south. If you're shooting more than 100 meters, that's very unusual. 100 yards, very unusual. I would honestly bring in rifles in and out of the UK. Sure, you can do it. It's all doable. I speak to people and you do it all the time. And I used to do it. I've sort of given up just because I got caught at Heathrow Airport once. I had 4 hours to get on a flight and just trying to check the rifle in. And that was just an awkward situation. The girl didn't really know what she was probably doing. But people aren't used to firearms. And I nearly missed my flight. And I thought, do you know what? Now I phone up estates or I speak to people like, if I'm going to come hunting with you, Mark, I would say, lend me a rifle. You've got good rifles, right? And everybody I know has got good rifles. The estates tend to have really good rifles, invariably Tickers or Bagaras or, with good stuff on them. The quality of the gear has got so much better now. It doesn't really warrant me taking my gear when I can go to an estate and pick up a good Sacco or Christensen Arms or Weatherby or something. They're all going to be good and they've got good optics on them. Everything's pretty good these days. So I tend to leave it at home and I can travel so much easier.
I mean, yeah, and that what a plus. I mean, even traveling here in the States, it's pretty simple. It's not a big deal to travel with a firearm, but a couple extra steps. It's always an extra checked bag, another thing to carry, even though they have wheels. And but yeah, just alleviating that variable from your travels just seems like a little bit of a sweet freedom. And like you said, you're gonna have a few probably extra layers, built in there, bringing it to the UK. So
certainly more challenging bringing firearms into the UK than this. I've done it both ways, and the States is a breeze by comparison.
Wow. Well, I guess I'll count my blessings then. Shot distances, like you said, a lot of the stuff down south pretty close. Are you guys going through the process of getting your ballistic data and dialing, for extended range shots in the more open landscapes? Or are you predominantly getting close enough to where that's really not, something that is a consideration?
Another good question. I'd say most people zero their rifle at 100 meters or close enough to 100 yards, just metric. They'll probably comfortably shoot out to 200. rarely will a shot be taken beyond 200 in the UK. People like their things to die well, right? And the estate keepers, the deer stalkers, will want to get you, they'll want to do their job. They'll want to get you in close and make sure they got you wet and dirty and made you work hard to do it. It's all part of the protocol over here, right? But they'll crawl you in and they'll want that deer because they've seen it. The minute that those distances start to stretch, and 200 is not a challenging distance anymore, with the right equipment, it really isn't, right? 300 isn't, 400, I think. But, I've shot in Asia, I've shot out to 800. And I've been lucky because the wind gods were with me. That could have easily gone the wrong way, but it was the only opportunity I had. And I thought, but that thing died. Now, if I did that, I made that shot 10 times, I might not get it right every time. I'm sure there would have been a few errors, but if the winds are good and everything, and the rifle's right and the caliber's right, you can do these amazing shots these days. And in places like Asia, it's absolutely necessary because the mountain might be that high and you're going to be at some crazy angle. You just can't get closer. In the UK, Scotland less so, you don't really have that excuse. You can get in pretty close to the animals. There's good cover, tends to be good cover, a lot of woodland. And you won't be, rarely will you be asked to take a shot longer than 100 yards.
Interesting. I mean, that's cool. I mean, I love getting as close as possible, right? But I've also been in a fair amount of situations where, yes, you might be able to get to 50 yards, but then you're risking a spooked critter, maybe a shot you're taking a little bit faster than you may ordinarily like. You're compromised in some sort of way where if you stood off a little bit, you might have all the time in the world. Yeah, it's a longer shot, but you're laying prone. You're like, the wind conditions are perfect. We're going to be good to go there, and it's almost like a more controlled situation. So. It's interesting though, but I love, getting close. That is, the fun stuff for sure.
Well, you've touched on a very important point. The caveat there, Mark, is you won't do a prone shot in the south of England. Very rarely, right? They're all going to be standing shots, right? Or kneeling shots. Very rarely will you get the opportunity to put a bipod on, which is ironic because we make bipods, but you will be shooting off sticks or a tripod because the undergrowth is so high and the species tend to be quite small. So you need to have that height on your side. So it's very rare. Now in Scotland, it's almost the opposite. You'll nearly always be shooting off a bipod because it's open terrain, it's heather. The springbok comes into its own up there because you need to get above the brush, but you'll be prone. So horses for courses, but be practice shooting off sticks, or if you want to do that, get comfortable with shooting, making standing shots.
Gotcha. We're talking about shooting here. What about glassing? Like I do a lot of tripod glassing and things like that. It sounds like pretty close quarter stuff down south in the more open landscapes. Are you sitting down on a tripod and glassing, or is most of your stuff handheld?
Different answer for different places. So Scotland, you'll absolutely be having your spotting scope on a tripod in the morning, checking the land, because you'll be covering huge areas, huge tracts of land. So there'll be a lot of glassing. You're going to pick your beast, say, right, we want to go after that guy there. Pretty much like you would do in the Northwest. You spend a lot of glass time. In the South, most people won't even have a spotting scope. They'll do it all through binoculars because it's all close quarter stuff. Binoculars, we do use thermal images quite a lot, which I think probably isn't illegal in many states for America, I'd guess, to hunt with. But the thermals are a game changer. When you're hunting muntjac and roe, to run a little thermal imager through the woods you'll miss 90% of your opportunities without one. And you'll still miss a lot of opportunities with one. Now, the quandary for me, because I've grown up without thermal images, it's always like, is this morally right or is it not? I don't have the answer to that, Mark. But we used one with my friend from Serbia. I would say at least 80% of the deer we picked up on, we would not have seen we just wouldn't, and we still missed loads of deer. So is it a help or is it cheating? I'm not going to get into a deep, dark argument on that one, but we've all got different sort of moral compasses, I guess. But for that kind of undergrowth, I think it's an excellent tool. Now, I'll add, if I'm doing deer management, meaning the estate wants the deer dead and as many as possible, I will not go to the woods without one of these units. I have to, because it just changes the game.
Well, and at that point, the objective is different. You are about efficiency at that point,
Yeah.
and that is going to create that efficiency. And what you were saying earlier, if it's legal, right? I think that's your baseline. But if it's legal, everybody has their own technology threshold, and like you said, you didn't grow up with thermal, right? So you kind of like, well, gosh, you're like, in some ways, you're like, oh, am I a traditional optics hunter or something like that?
Yeah.
Where somebody who they grew up with that, and that's their, that's going to be their norm. So again, if it's legal, I'd say, I don't know, knock yourself out. Whatever.
Yeah, everybody's using them. Everybody's using that, and they're all using moderators or what you'd call cans. That is one thing that was probably easier in the UK than that the friends in the States is the mods. I think they'll probably come off ticket soon. We'd just be able to buy them like you could in South Africa. But at the moment, they're still classed as a firearm, which is all a bit silly because they just moderate sound. And we got them for hearing protection because a lot of these professional deer stalkers were deaf at the age of 40 because they're shooting so many deer. So we say, look, this is just stupid. Can we please get some cans? So that's come about, and that's good. The thermal images, as I say, they definitely have their place, and I'm a big fan of them in the right environment. I wouldn't use them in Scotland, funnily enough, though, Mark, because I think that would be really, for me personally, and I'm not judging anybody else for it, but you're talking about open terrain. You've got to spot those deer. They're really hard to pick out. With a thermal, they're done. Right, there's one. And that, I think that would be beyond the cusp for me. But I'm not judging anybody else. But again, if I was deer managing in Scotland and I needed to do it, I'm sure they do a lot. They have night licenses up there and everything just to try and get on top of them.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm certainly, like you said, we different rules here oftentimes, but for me, and I think that goes to hunting in general. It's like, what are you looking to personally get out of the experience? And that's what I want people oftentimes to get, right? Like, what are you looking to get out of it? And I love glassing so much. And I love that feeling that you get when you're like, oh, I got one. Come over here and look. When you finally find it, or you're staring through your binoculars, and all of a sudden you're like, even in the center of the field, you're like, oh, there's one right there.
Yeah.
Like, no better feeling.
I'm with you. I'm totally with you. And some of the best moments I had, I was with some friends and we floated down the Frank Church Wilderness, and I left them for a couple of days on my own on the top of a mountain range on a tight, just enough room to put my little tent up. I was on a tiny ledge and I was up there. I was as happy as a pig in poo, and I was glassing with my optics and I could see like 3 miles that way, 2 miles that way. And I thought, this is fantastic. Really didn't actually find anything because I think the wolves had got there first, or it's just too early maybe in the season, but I freaking love that kind of thing. It's the hunting for me, pulling the trigger is just, the prey is just the excuse to be out, right? It's just, and it maybe took me a few years to learn that, but now it's just being with a great bunch of people or being solitary. I love that environment on my own, doing that kind of thing. It's the excuse to be there. You could say the same with a fly rod. You could say the same with ice axes. It's the excuse that justifies going to spend some time in some wilderness and getting that great solitude. I love it.
Oh, man. You nailed it. It is. I think of the places that I never would have been, which is most of the places that I've been, if there wasn't that North Star of this critter that I'm chasing or this fish that I'm after. I'm just not as likely to go hike into some high alpine lake and spend a couple days there, unless there's fish at the top or bears to chase or whatever it is. What about, are there any, traditional or customary things that go into, like, if you're hunting the UK? I feel like I've watched some videos where the stalker is carrying the person's rifle and it's cased the entire time until the moment of the shot. And that's a little bit foreign to me. And when I was watching that, is that what I was seeing? Like, is there some of that going on, or am I missing something there?
Top marks, you've done your homework, sir. So if we're in Scotland, that's absolutely what will happen. The stalker will carry the rifle. It will be cased until the moment where you actually start stalking in. Now, that might be 400 or 500 yards of you getting wet, going through some grimy bog, but that rifle's going to stay in that case, and it's his job to carry that rifle. He won't want you to carry it. Now, if you're down south, we're not as traditional. You'll be carrying your own rifle, right? And you'll be responsible for your own rifle and such like. So Scotland is very traditional about, and I quite like that. But to you guys, it's going to be really alien when you come in there. But I think you'll enjoy it. I think you'll like the culture, and they'll explain the reasons. Where we're going to Kildamorry, Sam Thompson's a brilliant entertainer. He knows so much about this. He's so passionate about the place. He's so passionate about the deer. It'd be good to do a podcast with him actually when we're there, because it's in his blood, and he knows all the history, and he'll tell you why they do all these things, and it's quite charming actually. You learn about these things, and what I love about hunting is what we do in the UK. The target is the same. We're going to try and get meat, trophies, whatever. How we go about it is very, very different. And the cultures are so different between Germany, Sweden, Scotland, America. But and particularly if we go to Asia, it's completely different out there. And I love that kind of thing, engaging with the locals and seeing how they do things. And the community in Africa is the same. But the great little flavors. And you think, well, I love this. But because hunters don't want to change too much, I think we still have that DNA, that culture in us. And I sort of quite like that. The equipment gets better. I absolutely like the equipment getting better because it means things die better, right? The glassing's better. I mean, look at the quality of your scopes now, your spotting scopes and everything. There's leaps and bounds. I grew up, Mark, with a fixed 4-power scope, right? I couldn't adjust it. That was with a Stutzen rifle. No wonder we didn't want to shoot beyond 100 yards because you'd probably miss. But now look what you've got, and I made a comment once. The guy that got me into deer hunting, a lovely old Scottish guy who's sadly not with us now, Jim Creedon, but what he didn't know about roe deer hunting wasn't worth knowing. And I said to him once, I said, "Oh, Jim, we're starting to push the distances out of it." I said, "Jim, we're getting pretty good at this." And he said, "No, we're not gearing." He said, "The gear's getting better." And he's absolutely right. The gear enables you to do things we could have only dreamt about 20 years ago.
Oh, 100%, and I am, man, I love it, right? Like it's made me a more effective hunter. It's made me in some ways, like some people might argue like, oh, because you can shoot a longer distance, are you losing part of the hunt? But then in the same breath, I'm so much more involved with my gear setup. There's more to my gear setup. I'm able to be more particular about my gear setup. My confidence level is incredible. Like the goal, oh man, if I can get to 100 or 200 yards, man, that is my goal. Can I extend that range quite a bit? Yes, I can. But it's only through doing all of this pre-work and practicing and getting to that point. So you could say like, oh, are you losing something? Maybe, but I actually don't think so. Are you gaining something? Maybe, yeah, I do think so. And then, from clothing, I mean, my goodness, like we can stay drier, we can stay warmer. Well, what does that do? Well, I'm going to be in the field longer, so I'm getting to enjoy more of that experience now. So I don't know. I think, man, we are in the golden era of gear, and that extends to your rifle support systems as well with the bipods and the Springbox shooting sticks, things like that. Gosh, we're lucky.
We're taking the best of now, aren't we? You know, we're using mounting climbing equipment to hunting, right? So layers, brilliant, right? We've got brilliant sleeping bags. We've got amazing tents. We've got incredible rifles. We've got incredible optics. Yeah, and I like my little bit. You know, I'm about support, be it a bipod, quad system, tripods, whatever. But that's my DNA. And I focus on that both for the hunting industry and now the defense industry. And we've made a lot of products for the defense industry. Some of them migrate between the two, not all, but it's just, that's what I love. And I think, touching on what you said, if we wanted to do hunting, we wouldn't get to the quality we are now. But if we wanted to try and achieve it some years back, the amount of weight you'd have had in your pack would have been insane. You'd have needed a freaking horse to back you up. Now, if you're sensible, you can really pack that down and you can go and do your effective hunt with your spotting scope, with your tripod, with your rifle. You could stay out for 2 freaking weeks, right? With not a lot of weight. I mean, that's the difference, you know, because gear has got so much better, as you say.
It's cool. That's yeah, we are super fortunate. If you're lucky enough to harvest a critter on one of these hunts, do you ever get to keep any of the meat or experience what that meat is like while you're there?
Well, you will at Kildamurray. You'll be living off that. We've got a fantastic chef there, and he's a lot of fun. And we eat a lot of the venison that we get. Yeah, often the sika deer, because the sika, particularly during the rut, the meat can be not quite as good in the red deer. So we might as well. But if you shoot a sika deer, we're going to be eating that before the red for sure.
Gotcha. And then what about antlers? Can you bring those home, or is there difficulty there?
There's some difficulty. There's a few challenges, but you can definitely do it. You know, you can have your antlers sent back to you for sure. They're not going to be anything these are not like something from Argentina or New Zealand, but they're still special. And I think what Sam's done on that estate, he's really, really particular about what he wants to take out. You'll find that quite fascinating, Mark, because it's not public land. There's only a few people that are going to get to man. He will know every one of those deer, right? He will know every one of those deer, and he'll have a target list and say, right, that guy's now 12 years old. He's starting to go back. We're going to have him, right? So you could get the opportunity to shoot a really nice stag for Scotland that's done his breeding, right? He's on his way home, so let's take him out and send him off the right way. You won't be shooting any 6-year-olds or anything like that. This is why it's lovely bringing Americans over. It's like, well, I love going to America because you just do things so differently, and you'll find that quite fascinating.
Yeah, that sounds super neat. And I think when I first was picking your brain, I certainly didn't expect an invitation. I was just super curious about it. What drew me into it was the fact that these weren't kind of your more, I don't know, like they seemed like very, native, like we're talking about small statured, but not genetically engineered. Like these are the stags that have been there for a long time. They're not modified in any way. They're on these estates, but they're free range. It just sounded really neat, and that's the type of experience that I'm looking for, I guess, and is what really piqued my curiosity. A person might say like, oh, that's not as impressive as maybe like some wild gold medal New Zealand stag, right, from an antler perspective. But to me, they're more impressive for what they are.
I think you've hit it. I mean, a lot of the deer in New Zealand are amazing, but they've been made to be amazing, right? I've just come back from New Zealand. I was hunting red deer with a friend down there, and that was freaking awesome as well. But it's poles apart from what we'll do in Scotland. Absolutely, totally different in every regard. So yeah, those deer have been up there for a long time. I've got a huge respect for them because it's not an easy environment to eke out and exist in. They're getting eaten alive by the flies in the summer. The food quality for them is terrible. They won't make old bones. Those deer, the same species down in the West Country, will live a lot longer, a lot healthier lives. Scotland, you don't want to grow up as a deer in Scotland. It's just freaking hard. And really, we're doing a good job because you're harvesting the older ones that have done their bit, they've done their genetics, and they're getting old and tired. I mean, this is honestly a true story. A friend of a friend, he had a stalker, and they were lining up on this deer. The deer sat down. They'll often sit down, and you have to wait for them to stand back up. They just sleep for an hour or two. And if you're with the stalker, you're going to stay there till that deer gets back up. So you're in for a long run. Well, this deer never got back up, and then often the stalker will get there. They use spotting scopes, old spotting scopes often. I mean, these things could be 100 years old. First of all, like long, it's all the tradition. But the tubes they're in are leather, and they'll use them to roar the deer. So they'll blow into the spotting scope to roar it out to get out. This deer just never got up. It had died. It literally sat down and died. I mean, the chances of that. So they're waiting to put a bullet in this deer, right? And it just died of old age.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
I mean, the odds of being there at that moment, and man, that's like, I don't even know what to explain. That would I never even I've thought of something
surreal,
like that happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy. That is crazy. If you're fortunate and you harvest the critter that you're after, are there, you mentioned that you could bring your family on a trip like this, that there's lots of things to do. So like, what other things, or if a person just wants to, do a variety of things, like what other activities might a person be interested in these areas?
Oh, I think you Americans, it's a glorious place for you guys because there's all that history, there's all the castles, there's some great restaurants like you guys have got over in America, obviously. There's a lot of things to do, but it lends itself. If I was going to Tajikistan or Mongolia, I'm not going to take my family. Well, I might take my kids because they're all up for that kind of brutality. But if I wanted to take a normal run of Mrs. that wants to go to the shops and do, Mongolia's not the place, right? Scotland, London definitely is. They're expensive, but then America's expensive now. So maybe it's not so expensive, but there's a lot of things you can do, and there's a lot of entertainment around the hunting. Also, the lodges up in Scotland, let's talk about those estates. They tend to be really glorious houses. You can get them with a cook. You can do your own cooking. You can do, self-catering, or you can get a cook in. There's so much you could, if you pick the right time of year, you could do your deer stalking, your salmon fishing, your grouse shooting all at once. There's a thing called the McNab, right, in Scotland, which is basically you shoot a red deer, you catch a salmon, you shoot a brace of grouse in 24 hours. It's not easy. And the challenge will be the salmon first. The next challenge will be the grouse. If you caught a salmon first thing in the morning, go after your grouse and then go after your stag, because you can invariably find the stag. But catching the salmon is very challenging. Grouse numbers are up and down in Scotland at the moment. It might be better this year. Hopefully it is. But it just gets worse and worse, and it's a shame. Maybe it's too hot. I don't know. But if you've got an opportunity to do that, that's fantastic.
I mean, that would seem like a difficult feat to accomplish in a week's stay. Maybe not.
Yeah, no, it would be. In a week's stay, several weeks stay, you might get the opportunity. I've spent weeks up in Scotland and not caught a salmon. So, but you need the conditions. If you've got good water in the river and there's a fresh flush of water and fresh flush of fish, you have a good chance for salmon. If you've got good grouse but there's only a few estates that will actually have grouse, salmon and red deer. So you'd have to pick your estate as well. But getting back to the family ethos, I think those lodges work really well as a family holiday. My kids grew up doing Scotland in lodges like that. We always did self-catered stuff, but there's so much to do. You can go mackerel fishing, sea fishing. The beaches up in Scotland are stunning. If the weather's good, you'll have a glorious time. You can have, obviously, Scottish weather thrown at you, and then maybe you won't have such a glorious time. But I'd encourage people to do it. Get out their comfort zone. And you're not going to be roughing it. You might have a rough day. You might be cold and wet for the day, but you're still going to be in front of a nice fire with a glass of whiskey in the evening if that's it's easy. These are day adventures. This is not like you and I going out for 2 weeks and really struggling.
Well, and that, I mean, what a difference maker, you know, and I've hunted, you know, I've been wet for multiple days at a time, right? And, you know, when you're telling the story afterwards, it's always great. But when you're there, it's pretty darn miserable. But, you know, with this good gear, you know, you can, number one, you can hunt in the rain all day, but being able to dry it out at the end of the day, man, that is a big plus. You know, not putting on, you know, damp gear in the morning. That's a morale booster.
Oh, 100%. I mean, if I wasn't doing bipods and shooting support systems, I'd be doing clothing, because I'm very picky about what I wear. And I'm not, you know, married to anyone. I might wear a jacket from Rab. I might wear trousers from Tiga, or, you know, it's what works. And there's some very, very good clothing out there, as you said. And I'm a big layer fan. I'm never wear anything other than merino on the skin, because I'm old and stinky these days, and synthetics just go off me really quick, and then everybody goes off me really quick. And then I will start wearing synthetics. Probably depends where I am or what environment, and then it's either synthetics or down, and then obviously a membrane on the top. But it makes our job so much easier, and it makes it so much more enjoyable. I can sit on the top of a mountain in Scotland where I've been soaked, drenched in the past, with a smile on my face, dry, because the clothing is doing what it's meant to be doing. So everything's got better, and it makes those adventures more tolerable. As you said, water down your back or being wet for 3 days, it's not fun when you're doing it. You can look back on it and laugh about it and think, and actually often some of the hardest, most scariest moments in the life create the best memories, because you conveniently forget the bad bits. But you think, well, that was pretty wicked, you know. But like on climbing, I've done some things and I thought, ooh, that was really close to the mark. Not so much with shooting, but when you think on it afterwards, you think, oh, that was all right. That's good. Would I want to do it again? Absolutely not. But I made it now, so I'm through that part. But,
I've always say, and I've been in, at least a decent handful of situations like that. You know, it's always cool when you get to tell the story, but when you're in it, it can be a little bit interesting. What talking, travel. At least, for folks in the States here, this is going to be an international travel event. Anything else a person needs to consider there, or stuff they might need to do that?
No, I mean, the gear that you're going to use in the States is the gear you're going to use over here. There's things I'm religious about taking. I always take a head torch. I always take it's just be comfortable with your gear. The one thing I would really be stringent about is practice with it before you get there. I run into this time and time again. Somebody buys something and they might know how it works. They haven't spent enough time engaging with it. They're not a team player yet. Use your gear. Don't use it. And the thing I harp on all the time about people learn to shoot on flat tables, and it's not real, right? Make yourself uncomfortable. Put yourself in an awkward situation, then get your stable platform. Get used to the gear. And the same with your clothing, the same with your tents and all that kind of thing. It's just practicing with it's quite good fun. If you give yourself time, but get good with it before you take it on your expensive holiday and screw it up because you haven't trained enough with it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good tip. And I've been guilty of it in the past. You get a new thing at the last minute and you're like, yeah, I'll figure it out when I get there. And, then all of a sudden you're just, you're struggling with it. You're frustrated. You're losing time. Like, yeah, if you can get some experience with your gear beforehand, that's a big deal. As far as the travel itself goes, just a passport.
Just your passport. Get used to, people often can upset stomachs when they travel and try different foods, and it doesn't have to be somewhere third world. So, just expose yourself to a bit of different stuff before you get out there. I'm quite good at that. I travel all over the world and I've got quite a robust stomach, but I'm always a bit careful with water. Just be aware, because water that's good for me might upset you. Water that's good for you might upset me. And I see that a lot. So things like that are quite important, because they can ruin your holiday, can't they?
Yeah. For sure. Well, we were just talking about gear, Rob, and I was chatting with you, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, or we're texting back and forth. And it sounds like you guys have some new stuff coming out, yeah?
Yeah, we have, and it's very much American focused. Just touching on, as we talked about Europe, Europe's an expensive country to hunt. So firearms tend to be expensive, hunting's expensive. The whole ethos of, if you're not wealthy, you're probably not hunting unless you're working to hunt in Europe. As there's a generalization, dangerous one, but it's more accurate than it would be in the States. So my challenge is, I want more people being able to afford and use Spartan Gear because I believe in it. I'm passionate about our little bipods, and I think they're an epic tool, and they should be affordable. You've got rifles like Savage, Mossberg, Ruger, making rifles for $500-600 that actually work really well, right? Well, you're not going to spend $300 on a bipod if you spent $500 on a rifle like that. So what we've done for the US market is we've come out with a Javelin Light that's $100. Now, it doesn't come with an adapter because a lot of rifles are getting Spartan ready now, meaning they've got the gunsmith adapter in, and you'll see that more and more in the States with American brands now as well. If you want an adapter when you buy the bipod, you get it at a discounted price. So that's $100 for our entry-level bipod. It is modular. You can still unscrew the legs. You can put more involved, complex legs on at a later stage if you wish. But it means somebody can go and buy that bipod for $100. And we've now got them into Shields. Not all the Shield stores, but some of the Shield stores are now stocking them. And I think more and more will jump on. I'm hugely excited about that because I'm a great believer in that company. Their staff are fantastic. They're knowledgeable. You go in there, and if you speak to the boot guy, he'll know about the boots. If you speak to the optics guy, they know about the optics. I really love that store. I love the ethos of it. So excited to see Spartan in Shields. We've then got the TL, which is a twist lock leg, which is, I really like those legs. And that's $150. So there's two cheaper products there for the US market. We've also made a quad stick system that you'll get to play with when you come over. And it's like the Springbok, but it's like two Springboks married together. So for your listeners, if you don't know what the Springbok is, it's a silicon-bodied bipod. What I can take no credit for this, listeners, because it was a Swedish professional hunter that came up with the concept when we were in the Arctic, freezing our nuts off. But he wanted this for predator management. And we've done that, and it's sold spectacularly well. But when we were practicing with the Springbok, we decided to put two silicon bodies on the ground and put another silicon body on the back. In essence, you've now got a quad system. And in Europe, quads were probably little known 15 years ago. Now everybody's using them. For subalpine, it's not an alpine product. If I was in the northwest of the States, I'd still be using tripods, absolutely. But if I'm on plains, I was going to Africa or hunting in woodland, this thing is a hell of a tool. So you have two Springboks married together. So you've got 2 points of contact on the ground, and you've got 2 points of contact on the rifle. One at the front using the Magnus switch system and a cradle at the back. So it's a very flexible, dynamic tool. And it's because there's no mechanical parts, it's really quite intuitive to use. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm off to Africa in 2 days. So we're taking them down to Africa. Well, on the back of that, we've also produced a Springpod tripod, which is like no other tripod. It's a silicon-bodied tripod, a bit like your Springbok bipod, but it's got 3 legs. But it's very, very easy, flexible. Is it a precision tool? No, it's not. It's not. This will not replace a standard tripod. So think again, listeners, if you think we've just created utopia. It's a very effective killing tool, right, for woodland hunting, plains hunting, and such like. And it's very fast to use. So I'm really excited about it. But they've all got their places.
Yeah.
Right? No one of these tools will do everything.
Well, and that's one thing that I really appreciate about a lot of your products is, yes, they provide the stability I need, but it's oftentimes the rapid deployment in dynamic situations and being able to adjust that dynamically if a situation changes fast to accommodate the shot that I need to take, at that time, or if I need to go from spot A, run over 10 feet to spot B, get reset and execute that shot. The speed and fluidness which I'm able to do that is a huge asset and a difference maker, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Mark. And as I say, I'm not going to be arrogant about it because I didn't invent this product. I just glued good minds together and to make this product. But I'm hugely excited about the Springbok range. And I think they're an affordable, fantastic tool for us hunters. And we were talking earlier about the Springbok being such an adaptable little bipod that you can do prone, kneeling, quick shots. You can do so much with it. I won't go to the woods without one now. I just love it. And I was not a believer in it, actually, until I started playing with it. I thought the more I use it, the more I love the tool. And now the turkey hunters,
well, we've
been talking about this.
I'm glad you brought this up and it's so funny because, we just wrapped our turkey season here in Wisconsin shortly, not too long ago. And I love turkey hunting. It's such a big deal. And I actually, when I was getting to leave for an out-of-state turkey trip this year, Rob, I went downstairs and I said, I got to go look at my Springbok shooting sticks. I got to see if there's a way to connect this to my shotgun. And there wasn't. And I was bummed about it. And I left it at home. But I haven't stopped thinking about how cool it would be to attach that to my turkey gun. And then pre-podcast, you were talking about something like this.
Well, it's not something we'd think about because we don't turkey hunt. The closest thing we've got is capercaillie, those big black grouse, the giant grouse, and we hunt those with rifles in Scandinavia and such like. And I do a bit of that, and that's another. We'd talk about that in another podcast. That's amazing. You're shooting these birds with rifles out of trees using a barking bird dog. It's very exciting.
Okay, yes, future podcast.
Future podcast. But honestly, a few turkey hunters that I've got to know rather well, this is crying out to be a shotgun support system for it. We can't move. We have to stay super. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm only telling you what I've been told because I've never done it. I'd like to give it a go. He said, we've got to be absolutely still, really camouflaged because these things have got great eyesight. And we've got to get that shotgun up and make a nice, precise shot. Well, if that shotgun's sitting next to you on a Springbok, just imagine how easy it is to implement that. And that's why I contacted you and said, will you make that fantastic little shotgun sight? We need to marry that sight with a shotgun and a Springbok and do some turkey hunting next year, Mark.
Yeah, you may have planned yet another trip. We might need to get you out here to, number one, even just experience turkey hunting. Rob, I would venture to guess, you might be like, oh, I don't know, it's just a silly big bird. Man, turkey hunting is one of the most fun, cool, interactive, exciting hunts. I mean, few things actually get me pumped up as much as the wild turkey. They are just a neat animal. And you brought up our new Viper enclosed shotgun red dot. I used that all spring this year. It's a game changer. And I think coupling your shotgun with that Springbok bipod could be, just the ultimate turkey setup and a game changer in a lot of ways as well.
Well, we've got as we speak, the operations director of Spartan, who also used to be a design engineer, went and bought a Benelli shotgun yesterday, and he said, and he's made an adapter to go on the end of the magazine. So in the next 6 to 8 weeks, we're going to have an adapter that just bolts straight on the end of the magazine nut, right? So it won't affect the rifle or the shotgun in any way, shape or form. So I will get you one, Mark, I promise. Well, when you come to Scotland, we'll have them. But and then I think some guys are coming to Scotland that bring in some shotguns. And one of those guys is a journalist from the States. He said, I'm mad crazy about turkey. I've been doing it for 30 years. I've got 30 shotguns. I was running. He said, that sounds freaking awesome. So I think it's got legs, excuse the pun, but you guys will know better. You will know better than I. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also the Springbok tripod would be great for kids or disabled people for turkey hunting for exactly the same reason, because it's going to support the shotgun they pick up, but it's going to give them more support. But as I say, it won't do what a tripod does, but it's incredibly flexible.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds super interesting to me, and like I said, intuitively, it crossed my mind, prior to this turkey season, just because I had enjoyed it so much while rifle hunting. And it makes a lot of sense for a variety of scenarios. And there might be some scenarios where, again, the beauty of it is, I don't need it for what I'm doing right now, but I have it if I need it for, what I'm doing here. And you can it's easy on, off, plug and play. Like you said, for you shooters who may not want to be sitting and supporting a shotgun for an extended period of time, that could be, an asset there as well. So yeah, I'm really curious to see it. It sounds pretty neat. And I think it, could do really well in a brand new market.
We're very excited about it, because I think you guys, there's a lot of people that turkey hunt and they all seem crazy about it. So I think this is almost, dare I say, a no-brainer, that tool. I think it'll just work, but you're going to find out. So we'll be testing that next year, and you'll be one of the guinea pigs for sure, Mark.
We'll give it a go, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of folks in the turkey world, a lot of people at Vortex end up getting themselves one, because there's I don't know, every hunter is passionate about what they do, but man, avid turkey hunters, I mean, that is a group of folks that they are into it, that's for sure.
I think from a Spartan's perspective, we've been very good at sticking at what we think we're good at, and we don't want to come out of that circle. And that is providing support systems. And I say systems because your environment changes, and we're providing the hunter with a Lego set, Meccano set, whatever you want to call it, where you can add bits, take bits away to make the system that works for you, because you know what you need. Now, if we were having a military discussion, I was with this British SAS 2 weeks ago, and we were showing them military systems. It's completely different tools, because they're doing a completely different job. And as I say, some will migrate across, but ironically, I was showing that Springbok to your US Coast Guard, and he said, Frit, I could use this in the boats and the helicopters because it's so, soft and easy. And I thought, well, yeah, so maybe that could go that way as well. I don't know, but they definitely had a keen interest in it.
Interesting. Awesome, Rob. Well, did we miss anything about, stuff that you have going on, or any stuff related to hunting the UK that a person might want to be thinking about if they are thinking about, or maybe they weren't, but maybe they're thinking about going now?
Yeah, I think, as I say, if people are really keen on it, they can always send me, you can give them my contact details. I won't get back to them straight away because I'm often traveling, but I am good at getting back to people. And I can certainly steer them in the right direction if they roughly know what they want to do. But, there's 6 species to play with. You don't all have to do it all at once. There's some very good people to look after people here. I think we've covered it off pretty well. I think we've nailed down the pitfalls. I say, unless you're desperate about bringing your own rifle, don't, would be my advice. Bring your optics. Bring your clothing, bring everything else, but I'd leave the rifle at home, because most of these estates have very good rifles anyway. They will always insist you get an opportunity to shoot it before you go hunting, so you'll get time to practice that as well. No, I think we've done, I don't think we missed anything, Mark. Well, we probably have, but I think we've covered most of it. But it's not difficult. It's not difficult to do, and it's not a million miles away.
Gotcha. Last question. Does a person coming from this side of the pond need to change their rangefinder from yards to meters?
I mean, yes, most people will work in meters in the UK, but I know as many people that are working in yards. I grew up with yards and yards. I do both. I am a meter person, I have to say, just because it's more logical to my simple brain. But there's still many people using yards over here.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know. I've a lot of my scopes that I dial now, or really all my scopes that I dial now, are in mils, but I still got the old rangefinder clicking in yards. So
yeah, it's what you grow up with, though, isn't it? The irony for me is I can picture inches and feet better than I can metric. If I say 6 inches, yeah, I can see 10, 12 inches. Yeah. What's it? Centimeters? That confuses me. But I tend to work metric for longer distances. I don't know. I'm really screwed up on that front. Apologies.
Too funny.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Rob, thank you so much. Appreciate all the information on hunting the UK. And man, we sidetracked and rabbit trailed into a lot of really fun stuff today, which we tend to do. That's part of the beauty of having these podcasts and chatting with people. Yeah, thank you so much. Tons of great information. And yeah, Rob Gearing, everybody, Spartan Precision, rifle support systems, and take a look at them. I know they've made me a more effective hunter. I appreciate that, and hopefully you folks out there appreciate this discussion, and maybe you've been inspired to check out some new ground, potentially look into hunting the UK like I did. Golly, like a year or so ago, and was just inspired to dive into it, and luckily ran into Rob and. Looks like I'm going to find myself there someday myself. Allow myself to introduce myself.
And Mark, don't forget, because I know you like your squirrel hunting. We've got plenty of squirrels to kill in the UK. You could spend a day doing that. Yeah.
Sign me up. Yeah. Sign me up. So
yeah, sounds good.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for your time, Mark. Enjoyed it as ever. It's always good.
Nope. Thank you, Rob. Take care. We'll talk to you soon. And everybody out there, take care. We'll talk to you soon as well. Happy hunting and shooting. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, give this video a like if you liked it, comment something below, and give us a subscribe to the Vortex Nation podcast channel. It would mean a lot to us. Also, why don't you give us a follow over on Instagram while you're at it, at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'd love to hear from you over there, and we'll keep you updated with all kinds of cool photos and videos from our adventures that we do here. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thank you again. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. Have a good one.